Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Dalet. For those of you that are watching my video, I know I look a little bit different than yesterday's video. It's amazing, aging 7+ years in one day. But I hope you enjoyed a throwback to the original Dirshu share of mine that was given live in Rabbi Pollack's shul in Willowbrook, Staten Island. So that was the first time I ever did that. First time I ever put out an old share. There was a reason why I had to do it, but in any case, it's good to be back in front of the camera. It's good to have the looking the way I really do. Okay, so we are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Dalet Amir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Kuf Tzadik Vav Amud Beis, the second Amud in Chelik Dalet. We pick up today 2 lines off the bottom of Kuf Tzadik Vav Amud Aleph Siman Shin Mem Hey Sif Dalet. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael Hanesuna Batzaru Bashivya Ha'imdim Ben Bayam Ben Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziam Yitzar Lervacha Me'afelu La'orim Mishib L'Geula Hashta Bagolo V'Zman Kariv and Amar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema from Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha, Yeshua Levi ben Ahuva Malka Chano, Rivka Bashir Leah, Chava Adasa, Baserel Gila Shifra, Bas Ilana Udal. They should all have a Refuah Shalema, B'Sar Shar Chole Yisrael. Okay, let's pick up here with Sif Dalid, says the Mechaber. 2 lines off the bottom, last word on the line, Kuf Tzadik Vav Amud Aleph. Chayrim Shebekasle Rishos Hayachid. Holes in the walls that are surrounding a Rishos HaYachid. Now, we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah that the Mechaber is discussing over here not only holes that open up on the Rishos HaYachid side and go into the wall, but are closed on the Rishos HaRabim side. The Mechaber is also discussing a hole that goes all the way through the wall from the Rishos HaYachid all the way through out to the Rishos HaRabim. So you've got a wall that's surrounding Rishos HaYachid, and on the other side, it's alongside the Rishos HaRabim. So says the Mechaber, a hole that is in this wall, but says the Mechaber, sheklape Rishos HaYachid, it does open up to the Rishos HaYachid. And like I said, Mishnah Berurah is going to say, either this means that it's only opened on the Rishos HaYachid side and it's closed on the Rishos HaRabim side, but even, this is a bigger chiddush, even if it goes all the way through so that it's opened on both sides, it's opened on the Rishos HaRabim side and the Rishos HaYachid side, says the Mechaber, Heim Rishos HaYachid. The interior of this hole in the wall is considered to be a Rishos HaYachid. Why is it considered to be Rishos HaYachid? So, from the Rishonim it seems to come out, the reason this is a Rishos HaYachid is that since it is opened to the Rishos HaYachid side, the B'nai Rishos HaYachid make use of it. The people that are inside that Rishos HaYachid, this is a hole in the wall that they make use of. They put things in there, and even though it goes all the way clear through to the Rishos HaRabim, still the B'nai Rishos HaYachid use it. And since the B'nai Rishos HaYachid use it, the interior of the hole becomes an extension of the Rishos HaYachid, and it has a din of Rishos HaYachid. Okay, let's pause here for a second, and let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. Sheklape Rishos HaYachid. Now again, I want to be very clear, because it's going to come up later. The Mechaber does not describe this hole as being a hole that goes clear through from Rishos HaYachid to Rishos HaRabim. From a simple reading of the Mechaber, all the Mechaber says is that this hole is opened on the Rishos HaYachid side. He doesn't discuss the Rishos HaRabim side at all. All he says is it's klape Rishos HaYachid. He tells us that it is opened on the Rishos HaYachid side, but he doesn't tell us whether or not it's opened on the Rishos HaRabim side. That's from a simple reading of the Mechaber. But says the Mishnah Berurah, Ritzaynai Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say over here is, Afilu impainim gam l'Rishos HaRabim, even if the hole penetrates all the way through and it's opened up on the Rishos HaRabim side, it's still considered Rishos HaYachid, kevan she'achar hu me'ever le'ever, since the hole goes all the way through. V'nichnas gam klape Rishos HaYachid, so that it is opened also on the Rishos HaYachid side, while it might be opened on the the Rishos HaRabim side as well, but it is open on the Rishos HaYachid side. Therefore, dinam kirishos HaYachid. Therefore, the halacha of the interior of this hole is that it has a din of Rishos HaYachid. V'alkein. And since it has a din of Rishos HaYachid, aser lahoitzi ezer davar shemunach al achor l'Rishos HaRabim, you would not be allowed to take anything from the interior of this hole out to the Rishos HaRabim, oy lekarmelis. Or let's say one side of the hole is Rishos HaYachid and the other side of the hole is a karmelis. You're not allowed to take anything from the hole out to the karmelis. So, very simple. If we're saying that the interior of the hole has a din of Rishos HaYachid, then if the outside is a Rishos HaRabim or the outside is a karmelis, you can't take anything from the hole and transfer it from the interior of the hole, which is a Rishos HaYachid, and transfer it out either to a Rishos HaRabim or to a karmelis. Either one is going to be aser. Or how about the other way? Let's say you're in the Rishos HaRabim and you take something from the Rishos HaRabim and you put it into the interior of this hole and you put it down. Chayiv. That would be an Issa Daraisa. You're transferring from Rishos HaRabim to a Rishos HaYachid. Issa Daraisa. Chayiv. Chiv Chatos. Okay. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'hinei das ha-Tosfos, and some of you might have thought about this already. V'hinei das ha-Tosfos, it's the opinion of Tosfos and Zayin and Beis. The less chiyuva, we can't say that there's an Issa Daraisa here. Ela im kein haya hachar arba al arba tvachim. Tosfos says, wait a second. You want to tell me that there's an Issa Daraisa? You want to tell me that the interior of the hole is Rishos HaYachid? And if you take something from Rishos HaRabim and put it into the hole, it's an Issa Daraisa? Well, hold it. In order for it to be an Issa Daraisa, don't you need a hanocha al gabe mokoim dalet al dalet? Don't you have to put it down in the Rishos HaRabim on a choshev a mokum, on a mokum that's at least 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim? So Tosfos says, sorry, you can't have an Issa Daraisa unless the interior surface of the hole is dalet al dalet. 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. Aval das Rashba v'Meiri. However, this is a machlokes rishonim. It's the opinion of the Rashba and the Meiri. The bechure Rishos HaYachid ein tzarich sheyeh rachav arba. The Rashba and the Meiri both say very clearly that no, you don't need a hanocha al gabe mokum dalet al dalet. The interior of the hole is seen as being an extension of Rishos HaYachid, and we're going to see later in today's shir that there are many rishonim who hold that when it comes to making a hanacha in Rishos HaYachid, you do not need to make a hanacha al gabe mokum dalet al dalet. If it has a din of Rishos HaYachid, then you're putting it in a Rishos HaYachid, that's already an Issa Daraisa. The Yeshlan din Rishos HaYachid atzma b'chol gavna, it's considered Rishos HaYachid, and you do not need a hanacha al gabe mokum dalet al dalet. Okay. Heim Rishos HaYachid. So, again, high level, the Mechaber told us a very simple halacha. The Mishnah Berurah expanded upon it a little bit. You have a Rishos HaYachid, it's surrounded by walls, right? Rishos HaYachid has to have mechitzos. So you have a wall that's dividing between Rishos HaYachid and a Rishos HaRabim, or a karmelis. You have a hole in the wall. The hole is opened up to the Rishos HaYachid side. It might also be open to the Rishos HaRabim side, but it's definitely open to the Rishos HaYachid side. Once the hole is open to the Rishos HaYachid side, the interior of that hole now has a din of Rishos HaYachid, says the Mechaber. Therefore, if you're on the Rishos HaRabim side of the wall, or on the karmelis side of the wall, you can't take anything and put it into the hole. That would be transferring either from Rishos HaRabim to a Rishos HaYachid, it's a Daraisa, or from a Rishos HaRabim to a karmelis, it's a Darabanan. Brings down, a machlokes rishonim, does the interior of the hole have to have a surface of dalet al dalet? Tosfos holds it has to have a surface of dalet al dalet because you need a hanocha al gabe makom dalet al dalet. The Rashba, the Meiri, other rishonim disagree. They say no, you don't need a hanocha al gabe makom dalet al dalet. Just by the way, I'm not going to go into it, but it is interesting that there's another machlokes over here, which we're not going to go into, which is the height of the interior of this hole. How tall does this space have to be? Mishnah Berurah doesn't speak about it. We're not going to go into it now. Moving along to Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Yud, says to Chavetz Chaim, Heim Rishos HaYachid, the interior of this hole as the din of Rishos HaYachid. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, Mistimas HaMechaber, from the way the Mechaber writes this in a very general way, mashma, the implication is, where is the hole, height-wise? Where is this hole on the wall? Now, the Mechaber doesn't discuss it. So from the way the Mechaber writes this in a very general way, it sounds like it doesn't matter what the height of this hole is on the wall. Whatever the height of the wall is, since the hole opens to the Rishos HaYachid, the interior has a din of Rishos HaYachid, right? From the simple reading of the Mechaber, does the Mechaber discuss this question? Where on the height of the wall is the hole? He doesn't discuss it. So it sounds like it's not Negeya, right? No matter where it is. If it's open to the Rishos HaYachid, it has a din of Rishos HaYachid. So that's the point that the Mishnah Berurah makes here. Mistimas HaMechaber, from the way the Mechaber wrote this in a very general way, mashba, the implication is, even if the opening of this hole is less than 10 tfachim off the ground, kevan shemufulashim klape pnim, since it opens up to the inside, to the Rishos HaYachid, dinam ki Rishos HaYachid, the interior of the hole has a din of Rishos HaYachid. V'chein mashma miloshin Ramah, and we didn't do the Ramah yet, but from the language of the Ramah, it's also going to sound like the Ramah agrees with that. Shekosav, the Ramah writes, De'em einam oivrim klape pnim, that if the hole does not open up to Rishos HaYachid, then nidainin lifi gavan v'rachban. The Ramah is going to say, what if this hole, the Mechaber discussed a hole that opens up to Rishos HaYachid. How about if the hole only opens up to Rishos HaRabim? It doesn't open up to Rishos HaYachid at all. So the Ramah tells us, you want to know what the din of that hole is? Oh, the din of a hole that only opens to Rishos HaRabim, then we have to discuss the question of height. We have to know how high off the ground is this hole. But it seems very clear that what the Ramah is saying is the Mechaber is discussing a hole that opens up to Rishos HaYachid. That has one din. How about a hole that opens only onto Rishos HaRabim? Oh, then we need to know how high on the wall does the hole open. Seems very clear from the Ramah, but in the Mechaber's case, where the hole opens up to Rishos HaYachid, it's not negayah to know what height the hole opens on the wall. So says the Mishnah Berurah, from the Ramah, it also sounds like the question of the height of the hole is not negayah. Since the hole opens up to Rishos HaYachid, it has a din of Rishos HaYachid. So v'chein mashma miloshen Ramah shekosav dim einam oivrim klape pnim, then nidainin l'fi gavan v'rachban. Mashma di'im acharin oivrim klape pnim, but if the hole does open up to Rishos HaYachid, like the Mechaber is discussing, then einanu mistaklin al gavan v'rachban. Then we don't care how high it is, and we also don't seem to care how big the surface is inside. Is it dalet al dalet or not? It's what it sounds like. Ula oilam ki Rishos HaYachid chashivi. It's, since it opens up to the Rishos HaYachid, it's called Rishos HaYachid. And says the Mishnah Berurah, indeed, v'chein kasvu ha-Magen Avram v'Tosefes Shabbos. The Magen Avram and the Tosefes Shabbos taka say like this. They say that the question of the height, not negayah. Once the hole opens up to Rishos HaYachid, the interior of the hole is Rishos HaYachid, we don't care how high off the ground this hole is located. Okay. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ube'el Yerabba Kosav, but the El Yerabba writes, the Dover Zeh Pluktehi Ben HaRishonim, that this is actually the subject of a Machlokes Rishonim. The Yesh Min HaRishonim Tesvira Lahu, because you have a Tosfos on Zayin Amud Beis in Shabbos, who holds, and Rabbeinu Yerucham as well, the Yesh Min HaRishonim Tesvira Lahu, the Kevan Shehu Lamata Me'asara. If the hole is located less than 10 tfachim off the ground, ein b'nei Rishos HaYachid mishtamshin bam. Then we cannot view the interior as an extension of the Rishos HaYachid, because if the hole opens up less than 10 tfachim off the ground, the b'nei Rishos HaRabim will not make use of this hole. Why? Shekevan shu nomuch, because since it's very low, B'nei Rishos HaRabim mishtamshim sham. The people from Rishos HaRabim will use the hole as well. So first of all, it seems very clear from the Mishnah Berurah that the Mishnah Berurah over here is discussing a very specific case. He's discussing the case of the hole that goes all the way through the wall. So he's saying like this, from the Mechaber and the Ramah, it sounds like the question of the height, not Negeah. If the hole opens up to Rishus HaYachid, the interior of the hole is a Rishus HaYachid. I don't care how high off the ground the opening of this hole is. Says the Mishnah Berurah, not so fast. It's actually a Machlokes Rishonim. Because you have Tosfos and Rabbeinu Yerucham who say that if the hole opens up both to Rishus HaYachid and to Rishus HaRabim, then it does matter what the height of the hole is. You know why? Because if the hole is less than 10 tefachim off the ground, then they reason it's very accessible to the Bnei Rishus HaRabim. It's a very conveniently located place to stash something if you're walking along the Rishus HaRabim. 10 tefachim, approximately 36 to 40 inches. So you've got something that's, less than 3 feet or less than 40 inches off the ground. If you're walking in Rishus HaRabim, this is a very convenient place to stash something. Therefore, they say, since it's very convenient for the Bnei Rishus HaRabim to use it, the Bnei Rishus HaYachid will refrain from using it. Makes sense. The people in Rishus HaYachid, if they're going to use the hole, why are they using the hole? They're using the hole to put their personal possessions there. They're using it to keep something there that they want to be able to retrieve whenever they need it. But if it's a hole that the Bnei Rishus HaRabim are using, you're not going to put anything there, because somebody from Rishus HaRabim will take whatever you put there. They're putting things there. It's very old that you're going to lose whatever you put there. So they say, if the hole is less than 10 tefachim off the ground, it's too easy for the Bnei Rishus HaRabim to use it. Therefore, the Bnei Rishus HaYachid will not use it. And since the Bnei Rishus HaYachid will not use it, we cannot view it as being an extension of Rishus HaYachid, and therefore it would not have a din of Rishus HaYachid. V'alkein. And therefore, dinam k'chayrei Rishus HaRabim. Now that hole is going to have a din of a Rishus HaRabim hole. What's the din of a Rishus HaRabim hole? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hamavur l'kaman b'Sif Yud Gimel. We're going to discuss that in Sif Yud Gimel. We'll touch upon it very, very shortly in the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah as well. So again, what's the point that the Mishnah Berurah is making? The Mishnah Berurah is saying that from the Stimas Haloshin of the Mechaber and the Ramah, from the way the Mechaber and the Ramah wrote this halacha, right? They don't say a word about the height of the opening of the hole. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, it sounds very clear from both the Mechaber and the Ramah that the question of the height is not negeah to this halacha. And even more so from the Ramah, because the Ramah makes the point of saying, if you're dealing with a hole that opens to Rishus HaRabim, then we have to deal with the height. Okay, the clear implication is, but if it opens up to the Rishus HaYachid, we don't have to care about the height. So it sounds like question of height off the table, not negeah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it's actually a Machlokes Rishonim. We have a Shitas HaTosfos and a Rabbeinu Yerucham that says we do have to look at the height. Why? Because they reason, if the height of the opening of the hole is less than 10 tefachim off the ground, then this halacha goes away. Then we cannot say that the interior of the hole is Rishus HaYachid because it's an extension of Rishus HaYachid. Why? Because the Bnei Rishus HaYachid will not use it. Why will the Bnei Rishus HaYachid not use it? Because it's too easy for the Bnei Rishus HaRabim to use it. And since it's so easy for the Bnei Rishus HaRabim to use it, the Bnei Rishus HaYachid are going to refrain from using it. Therefore, it's not an extension of the Rishus HaYachid. Okay. Now let's go weiter. We have to see the Ramah turning back to Kuf Tzadik Vav on Ben Aleph on the bottom line. Hagah, says the Ramah. Okay, so until now, the Mechaber has discussed a hole that's opened up to the Rishus HaYachid. And we saw in the Mishnah Berurah, it also covers a hole that goes all the way through the wall. It's open to Rishus HaYachid and to Rishus HaRabim. How about if it's only open to Rishus HaRabim? So really, that's going to be the subject of Sif Yud Gimel. But the Ramah interjects over here. And we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah why the Ramah felt the need to make this interruption, or this Hagah, this emendation. Why did he feel fit that he had to make it? Why did he have to say, interject? Why did he have to say this? Now, we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah. But it says the Ramah Hagah. V'imheim klapi chutz, if the hole is only opened to the Rishus HaRabim, ve'enam oivrim klapi pnim, it does not open to the Rishus HaYachid, it only opens to the Rishus HaRabim, then nidainim lefi gavan v'rachban, then we have to look at the height, and we have to look at the surface area of the hole. So the Mechaber, the Ramah is being very clear, the Mechaber was talking about a hole that opens up to the Rishus HaYachid, and either only to the Rishus HaYachid, or to the Rishus HaYachid and the Rishus HaRabim. But what if it opens only to the Rishus HaRabim and it doesn't open to the Rishus HaYachid at all? Oh, then the Ramah says, well, then we have to deal with the height of the hole and with the interior surface area of the hole. Like we're going to see in Sif Yud Gimel. Okay, he doesn't tell us what the din is, right? He says you'll see it in Sif Yud Gimel. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut Yud Aleph. If the hole only opens to Rishus HaRabim, then lefi gavan v'rachban, then we have to decide on the status of this hole by analyzing the height of the opening of the hole and analyzing the interior surface area of the hole. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so what's the din? Imheim gevayim asar tfachim. If the opening of the hole is 10 tfachim off the ground, and the interior surface of the hole is 10 tfachim off the ground, imheim gevayim asar tfachim v'roichav arba'a, and the surface area inside the hole is dalet tfachim al dalet tfachim at least, have a Rishus HaYachid. Well, then it's a Rishus HaYachid. Now, the truth is, against the backdrop of yesterday's share, we understand this, right? If you're talking about a surface located in Rishus HaRabim that is 10 tfachim off the ground, so you have an elevation, you have a tail, you have a mound, tough limud, not T-A-I-L. In English, it would be T-A-L. If you have a tail, if you have a mound, a word that we're going to have a lot, in Rishus HaRabim, and it has an elevation of 10 tfachim off the ground, and it has a surface area of dalet al dalet, what's the halacha of that surface? It's a Rishus HaYachid. So what are we dealing with here? Over here, we're dealing with a surface that is essentially located in Rishus HaRabim, because it's the hole in a wall that is only opened to the Rishus HaRabim side. It's not open to the Rishus HaYachid side. So essentially, it's an elevated surface in the Rishus HaRabim. So what's the halacha? If it's 10 tfachim off the ground, and it's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim minimum, it's a Rishus HaYachid. So says the Mishnah Berurah. The Ramah says, if it's only open to the Rishus HaRabim, how do we decide its status? We look at the height, and we look at the, I guess it would be called the lateral surface measurements, right? If it's an elevation of 10 tfachim, and it's dalet tfachim by dalet tfachim, it's a Rishus HaYachid. V'im einam gevayim asar tfachim, let's say it's less than 10 tfachim elevation. If it has an elevation of less than 10 tfachim, but more than 3, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't mention that. If it's between 3 tfachim off the ground and 10 tfachim off the ground, all right, what's the halacha then? We have an elevation in Rishus HaRabim of a height between 3 tfachim and 10 tfachim. So then, im einam gevayim asar tfachim, oz, then it depends on the lateral measurements. Im heim roichav arba, if it's a mokum choshev, because it has a surface of dalet al dalet, so you have a surface of dalet al dalet that's less than 10 tfachim, but more than 3, heavy karmelis. So then it's a Rishus D'Rabbanan. It's a karmelis. You're not allowed to take anything from the Rishus HaRabim and put it on this surface. You're not allowed to take anything from the surface and take it out to Rishus HaRabim. It would be an Issa D'Oraisa. You're not allowed to take anything from a Rishus HaYachid and put it there, from there to Rishus HaYachid. It would be an Issa D'Rabbanan. It's a Rishus D'Rabbanan. So again, if the hole is less than 10 tfachim off the ground, so, okay, what's the width? What's the lateral measurement? If it's dalet al dalet, it's a makom chashiv. If it's a makom chashiv, it becomes a karmelis. It's a Rishus D'Rabbanan. The imlav, what if it doesn't have dalet al dalet on the surface? Okay, if it doesn't have dalet on the surface, have a makom p'tur. So then it's a makom p'tur. You can do what you want. You could pick something up from the Rishus HaRabim and put it there. You could take something from there and put it down in the Rishus HaRabim. No problem. It's a makom p'tur. V'afte mavor dina de Ramah behed yibasif yud gimel. Now points out the Mishnah Berurah in the brackets. This is a very funny Ramah. I mean, why did the Ramah interject over here with this question? Oh, what's the din if the hole only opens onto Rishus HaRabim? We'll see it. It's if you gimel. Why? And befrat that the Ramah doesn't tell us what the halach is. The Ramah just says, then we have to reckon with the height and the lateral measurements. He doesn't even tell us what the halach is. We need Mishnah Berurah you're not have to tell us what the halach is. So why did the Ramah interject over here? Explains the Mishnah Berurah. And it took me a minute just to chop what the Mishnah Berurah was saying. Says the Mishnah Berurah that if you remember, I told you in the beginning of this sif, the Mishnah Berurah says that the Mechaber is discussing either a hole that only opens onto Rishus HaYachid or a hole that opens up onto Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. But the Mechaber doesn't say that. So how do we know that that's the case? How do we know that the Mechaber's halacha pertains to a hole that goes all the way through the wall? How do we know that? The answer is we know it from the Ramah. How do we know it from the Ramah? Because what did the Ramah say? The Ramah interjected and said, the Mechaber told us one halacha. Now I'm telling you that there's a carve-out. What's the carve-out? A hole that only opens onto Rishus HaRabim. That means that the Mechaber's halacha covered all the other cases. So it's very clear from the Ramah that the Mechaber covered a hole that opens only onto Rishus HaYachid, or a hole that opens onto Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Comes along, the Ramah says, but there's one more case. What if the hole only opens onto Rishus HaRabim? Oh, that's Sif Yud Gimel. Then we have to reckon with the height and the lateral measurements. That's how we know that the Mechaber was covering the other two cases. The Mechaber was covering both the hole that opens only onto Rishus HaYachid and the hole that opens both onto Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Let's see it in the words of the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah in the brackets here. Va'aftem avur dina de Ramah behedi b'sif yud gimel. Even though the halacha that the Ramah is addressing is beferish in sif yud gimel, nakdei hacha, he interjects and says it over here, kedei levaer, in order to explain to us, da afilu chayrei rishus harabim kishemefuloshin l'rishus hayachid. Even holes that open up onto Rishus HaRabim, but they go all the way through to the Rishus HaYachid, dinam kichayrei Rishus HaYachid. They're included in this halacha that the Mechaber codifies by calling them holes that open onto Rishus HaYachid. Included in that are also holes that open on both Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Okay. Complicated sif. Moving along to Sif Hey, second line, Kuf Tzadik Vav Amud Beis, says the Mechaber. Avir Rishus HaYachid. The airspace over Rishus HaYachid. Avir Rishus HaYachid, Hu Rishus HaYachid Ad L'Rakia. The airspace of Rishus HaYachid goes all the way up Ad L'Rakia. You have your Rishus HaYachid, your airspace is Rishus HaYachid. I don't care how high you go, the airspace of Rishus HaYachid is Rishus HaYachid Ad L'Rakia. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut Yud Beis Ad L'Rakia. And interesting halacha comes out because of that. Va'afilu not kana b'Rishus HaYachid shegavoya mea amos. Even if you would take a pole and you would stick it into the ground, and it is a pole that is 100 amos tall, so it's almost 200 feet tall. So you have a 200-foot pole. Now, there's something that I want to point out over here, and that is that a kaneh, a pole, in the parlance of the Gemara and halacha, is narrow. So there's no such thing as a pole that has a surface area of dalet al dalet. If it had the surface area of dalet al dalet, it would not be called a kaneh. It would be called an amud, a pillar. So a kaneh is a narrow pole. That's very pertinent. But what's the Mishnah Berurah saying? The Mechaber said that the airspace of Rishus HaYachid is Oila Ad L'Rakia. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what's the ramification of that? What do I care? What's the ramification of it? Oh, if you would take a 200-foot pole and you would stick it into the ground in Rishus HaYachid, Av she'ein by roichav arba, even though there's no surface of dalet al top, it's not dalet al dalet wide, Im Zorak me Rishus Harabim. If you would throw something from the Rishus Harabim, v'nochal gabov, you throw something 200 feet up in the air, and it lands on top of this koneh that is sticking in the ground in Rishus HaYachid, chayiv, is a daraisa, is a chatos. You did hoitzah from Rishus HaYachid, you did hoitzah from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid. You transferred something from the Rishus Harabim to the Rishus HaYachid because Rishus HaYachid oila ad l'rakia. Now, the question that comes up right away, and this came up earlier in the shir with the holes. Wait a second. Don't you need a hanacha al gabe mokum dalet al dalet? And the answer is that, and there's a lot of raid about this, but, we can only do what we can do, and we're not learning Masechta Shabbos now. The sugya of Hoitzah is the very first sugya in Masechta Shabbos, and it's a complicated sugya. It's a rough sugya, the sugya of Hoitzah. But this comes straight out of a Rashi. This halacha that Rishus HaYachid oila ad l'rakia is really a Gemara in Daf Zayin Amud Beis, Zayin Amud Aleph. It's on Zayin Amud Aleph in Masechta Shabbos, and you have over here a memra of Rav Chisda. The Ha'amar of Chisda, Rav Chisda says, not kana b'Rishus HaYachid, if you plant a pole in Rishus HaYachid, v'zarak, and you throw something up, v'nachal gabav, and it rests on the top of the pole. So you threw it from Rishus Harabim, and it comes to rest on top of the pole in Rishus HaYachid. Afilu gavaya mea amma, even if the pole is 100 amas tall, chayiv, you're chayiv, it's an issa daraisa. Wait a second. Hanocha mokum dalad al dalad. Says Rashi, chayiv kemunach al gabe karka. We look at it as if it's resting on the ground in Rishus HaYachid. Deloi boi hanocha al gabe mokum dalad b'Rishus HaYachid. In Rishus HaYachid, we do not require a hanocha al gabe mokum dalad k'demefarish l'kamei b'shmaitin, like comes out from the Gemara later on, says Rashi. So again, over here we see that in Rishus HaYachid, you do not necessarily need a hanacha al gabe mokim dalid al dalid. Okay, so just to wrap up Siman Hey. So what's the halacha of Siman Hey? Rishus HaYachid is oila ad l'rakia, and therefore, even if you have a pole 200 feet tall, you throw something from Rishus Harabim, it lands on top of the pole, that would be Hoitzah Daraisa, transferring something from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid. Moving along, Sivav. Says the Mechaber. Afilu keli, even some kind of a keli, some kind of a vessel, a piece of furniture. Kigoin, for example, teva, some kind of a box, a chest, a migdal, also some kind of piece of furniture or chest. Oy kaveres. A kaveres is like a round basket-like structure. Kaveres literally means a beehive. This is something round, kind of shaped like a beehive that's meant to contain things. Im yesh l'rabea boy arba al arba. If the keli that we're talking about is a teva was generally considered to be square. That's when you would use the word teva, would be to refer to a square keli. So you have some kind of a chest that's sitting in Rishus Harabim. What is the din of the surface of the interior of this chest? Is the interior of this chest Rishus Harabim, because the teva is located in Rishus Harabim, or is the interior of the chest a Rishus HaYachid? Well, says the Mechaber, it's going to depend on its measurements. If the teva is 4 by 4 tvachim, so then it is big enough, it's a makom chashuv, and it has, it's big enough to be a rishus la'atzmai, it's big enough to be considered its own rishus. So says the Mechaber, afilu keli, kigoin teva migdal kaveres, im yesh l'rabeya by arba al arba, if it is big enough to contain a 4 tefach by 4 tefach square, v'hu gavaya asara, and it's 10 tefachim tall, have a Rishus HaYachid. It's a Rishus HaYachid. Again, a little confusing sometimes, but we got to get used to this. Just do the math and follow the rules. If you have something in Rishus Harabim that is gavaya asara tefachim, it has an elevation of 10 tvachim, and it's a makom choshev, it's dalet tvachim al dalet tvachim, well then it is a rishus hayachid. So if you have a teva, again, teva usually square, and it's dalet al dalet, and it's 10 tvachim tall, then it is a rishus hayachid. If it's kaveres and it's round, so now we can't measure the sides and do dalet al dalet, it's round, it has to be able to contain a dalet al dalet square. And we'll see exactly what that means in the Mishnah Berurah. But if it does, so then its interior is a rishus hayachid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois cotton yud gimel. Afilu keli. Hainu afilu hi amedes b'rishus harabim. This chest, this piece of furniture is located in the rishus harabim. But if it has the measurements that make it a rishus hayachid, then it is a rishus hayachid. Oiskot Yudal, Teva, Oy Kaveres. Nokat Shnemine Kalim, the Mechaber was very careful to include two types of Kalim, Merubayim, Oy Agulim, both square Kalim and round Kalim. The Teva is the square Kali, the Kaveres is the round Kali. Oiskot Desvav, Im Yesh L'Rabeya, if it could contain a square. The words of the Mechaber literally mean, Im Yesh L'Rabeya Boy. If you could insert a square into it, that is arba, that is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim, then it becomes a rishus hayachid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we have to be very careful to understand what this means. What does it mean that you have a round keli that could contain a square of dalet al dalet, right? So that means you have a circle. And here comes my how I am artistically challenged. But we do what we do, and we do what we can do. So I'm gonna try. Should have prepared this in advance. Okay, we're using some artistic aids over here, rulers and whatnot. Bear with me, Rabbi Isai, for one moment. I did think to do this in advance. I just forgot to do it. Yeah, you're going to see my measurements are off because my square is more of a rectangle, but you'll get the point. Okay, the Mechaber said that you need, if it's round, it has to be such that you could insert a square of 4 by 4 into it. Well, my rectangle slash square over here is 4 by 4. You can see I wrote a 4 here and I wrote a 4 there. The size of this construct that's supposed to be a square, this is a 4 tefach by 4 tefach square. Now, if you have a 4 tefach by 4 tefach square and you want to put it into a circle, right? What is the diagonal of this square, right? The diagonal of this square is not 4 by 4. You apply the Pythagorean theorem to figure out, right? This line, the diagonal, is the hypotenuse of a right triangle. So you use the Pythagorean theorem, and what you come up with over here is that this hypotenuse, the diagonal of the interior square, is going to be 5 3/5 tvachim. Trust me, I did the math. So if you have a 4 by 4 square, you're going to have a 4 tefach by 4 tefach square. The diagonal of that square is going to be 5 3/5 tvachim. Now, if you want to take this square and you want to insert it into a circle, the circle is going to have a diameter. It's going to have a diameter that's equal to the diagonal of the square. So, says the Mishnah Berurah, let's see it inside. Valkain, since this is true, Bekaveris when we're dealing with a kaveris which is round, lo yehav rishus hayachid, it's not going to be considered a rishus hayachid ad shetihia chalola machazekes chamisha tvachim u'shloisha chumshei tefach. The diameter of this circular chest is going to have to be a minimum of 5 3/5 tvachim, because that's the diagonal of the 4 by 4 square that you need to be able to insert into this circle. If this chest or piece of furniture or keli meets these requirements, then heavy rishos hayachid. Then this keli becomes a rishos hayachid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is true. Bein toich chalala, the interior of this piece of furniture is now going to be a rishos hayachid. Ubein gav hakli melamala, and also the tops of the walls of this structure are also going to be considered rishos hayachid. Because again, essentially, what are we saying over here? A rishos hayachid has to have mechitzas that are 10 tefachim tall. If you have mechitzas that are 10 tefachim tall, and it's surrounding an area that is at least dalet al dalet, that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, then the interior is a rishos hayachid. So if you have a teva, you have a chest, and the chest is a chest that is 10 tefachim tall, well then that means that the walls of the chest, i.e., or aka, the mechitzas, are 10 tefachim tall. And the interior is dalet al dalet, so you have a little portable rishos hayachid here in rishos harabim, right? Again, let's make this very simple. Let's say you go to a rishos harabim and you build 4 walls in middle of a rishos harabim. So you mark off on the ground an area that's 16 inches by 16 inches, roughly dalet tefachim by dalet tefachim, and you put up 4 walls around that area. Well, then the interior is a rishos hayachid. You have a place that's dalet al dvalid, mukaf mechitzis of asar tefachim. It's a rishos hayachid, right? Well, if you have a chest, you have a movable rishos hayachid. You have a chest, it's 10 tefachim tall, so it has mechitzis of 10 tefachim, and its interior is dalet al dalet, so you have a portable rishos hayachid. Now, what did we learn yesterday about a rishos hayachid? We learned yesterday that if you have 4 walls surrounding a rishos hayachid, and the walls have some thickness to them, then the top surface of the wall is also a rishos hayachid, right? We learned the kal v'chomer. If the walls could make the area that they are surrounding into a rishos hayachid, then certainly the top surface of the walls themselves are rishos hayachid. That's all. That's exactly what the Mishnah Berurah is applying over here. The Mishnah Berurah says over here that on this teva, that's 10 tefachim tall, and it's dalet al dalet, or the kaveres, the round one, that's 10 tefachim tall, and it's encircling an area that's dalet al dalet, because you could put a dalet al dalet square inside. So it's a rishos hayachid. Bein terchalala, its interior is a rishos hayachid. Ubein gava kli melamala, or the upper surfaces of its walls are also a rishos hayachid. The chanal b'sif gimel. We saw that halach already previously yesterday in sif gimel. Okay. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, what if you have a keli in rishos harabim that doesn't meet these requirements? Let's say you have a keli located in rishos harabim that is not 10 tefachim tall. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ukli she'en gavaya asara ha'imid b'rishos harabim. If you have a keli that does not have a height of asar tefachim, and it is sitting in rishos harabim, ein loy din karmelis. It doesn't have a din of a karmelis. Now, why is the Mishnah Berurah going out of his way to tell us this? I believe the reason the Mishnah Berurah is telling this to us is because, let's think about it for a second. Let's apply the rules that we learned yesterday about a tail, a mound, that's located in rishos harabim. So a tail by rishos harabim, a mound in rishos harabim, that is 10 tefachim tall and is 4 by 4, the top surface becomes a rishos hayachid. If you have a tail in rishos harabim that's less than 10 tefachim tall, let's say you have a tail in rishos harabim that's 7 tefachim tall, somewhere between 3 and 10. Okay, what are the lateral measurements of its surface? If the lateral measurements of the surface are dalet al dalet, 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, then it's a makom chashuv. Now, it's a makom chashuv, but it still can't be a rishos hayachid because it's not tall enough. So what is it? It's a karmelis. Oh, you hear that? So if you have a chest, you have a box in rishos harabim, and the box is 7 tefachim tall, and it's dalet al dalet, you might be very tempted to say that it's a carmelis. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, it's not a carmelis. You know why? Ein loy din carmelis to ein carmelis bekelim. Very interesting rule. A keli cannot be a carmelis. An area of ground space could be a carmelis, but a keli cannot be a carmelis. Elahevi kamay rishos harabim. Instead, this will be rishos harabim. It's considered to be subjugated to rishos harabim. The batal legabi rishus shu oimid by, it's batal to the rishus that it's in. It doesn't become a carmelis. It becomes it becomes subjugated to the rishus harabim, and it's a rishus harabim. Ulafizeh, according to this rule, that a keli becomes subjugated to the rishus that it's in, unless it's tall enough. Ulafizeh, im oimid akli bekarmelis. If this keli that's 7 tvachim tall, 4x4, is located in carmelis, then carmelis alav mitzad rishus shu oimid by. It's going to become a carmelis because it's subjugated to the rishus that it's in, which is a carmelis. V'chen muchach lekaban b'simin shin nun hey. V'chen kasav b'beis meir. Now, one last rule, says the Mishnah Berurah, ukli hamechuber lekarka. If you have a keli that is attached to the ground, cemented to the ground, you have a keli that's attached to the ground, and it's dalid al dalid, but it's more than 3 tvachim and less than 10 tvachim, mikri carmelis afilu hu b'rishus harabim. That will become a carmelis, because since it's attached to the ground of the rishus harabim, it no longer has a din keli. Since it doesn't have a din keli, so now it's an elevation in the rishus harabim between 3 and 10 tvachim, and it's dalid al dalid, so it's a carmelis. Less than 3 tvachim, it's bottled to the karka, and it would just be rishus harabim. Okay, moving along to Sif Zayin, let's just do a little bit more. We're not going to do the whole Sif Zayin, but let's do a little bit of Sif Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Ezehu rishus harabim. So we've been discussing different aspects of rishus hayochid. What's a rishus harabim? Ezehu rishus harabim. Loosely, we usually translate rishus harabim as a public domain. But what does that mean? So says the Mechaber Ezehu rishus harabim. What's a rishus harabim? Rechayvos, city streets, ushvakim, marketplaces, harichavim sheish esrei amma. They have to be at least 16 feet wide and 16 feet long, but they have to be at least 16 feet wide, somewhere approximately 30 feet wide. Ve'ena mikurim, and they cannot be roofed over. Ve'en lehem chayma, and they're not surrounded by walls. Very basic, high-level rules. Says the Mishnah Berurah, rechayvos. The Mechaber is talking about rechayvos, which literally are city streets. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah makes the point. Udrachim she'oivrin me'ir le'ir, when you have roads that go from city to city. So they're not city streets, they're highways that go from city to city. Havigam kein rishus harabim, that's also going to be considered a rishus harabim if it's 16 feet wide. Mishum deshchichi bam rabim, it's made lehiluch harabim. So if it has the minimum size of 16 amas, and it's made lehiluch harabim, it's going to be considered a rishus harabim. I lost my place there, 1 second. Yeah, Drachim Shoivim Erev Gamke, which is Rabbi Shum Deshchika Baram. Oiskan Yuches, Harichavim Sheish Esrei. The Mechaber said that these streets, these roads, they have to have a minimum width of 16 amas. Why? Where does this magical number of 16 amas come from? Oh, the Mishnah Berurah tells us where it comes from. The Alfinon Midigle Midbar, because we learn this from the Machaneh, from the encampment of the Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. And specifically, we learn this from the roads, so to speak, of the Machaneh in the Midbar. Okay? Shemekoim hilach ha'agolois hayamachzik sheish esrei. We know that the roads in the Diglei HaMidbar had to have a minimum width of 16 amas. How do you know that? The reason we know that is because we know that the Leviim were coming up to Hanukkah, and the Kriyas HaTorah, the laning on the first day of Hanukkah, is going to discuss the gifts that the Nesiim gave to the Melechus HaMishkan. Amongst them were wagons that were used by the Bnei Merari, I'm going to say, to transport the krushim, the beams that the Mishkan was constructed out of. And the Gemara learns out the very precise measurement of the agolim. And what we know is that these agolim were 5 amos wide. And we know that they used to bring 2 of these agolos, 2 wagons, and put them next to each other. So 2 agolos next to each other is 10 amos. But you can't put the 2 wagons right up against each other, right? They're going to sideswipe. So they would leave a 5 amos space between the 2 wagons. So you have 2 wagons, 5 amos each. You have 5 amma gap between the 2 wagons. That's 15 amos. Also, you don't run the agolos, the wagons, all the way up against the edge of the road. You need to leave a half an amma between the agola and the edge of the road. So now you have 2 wagons, 10 amos, 5 amma gap in between, 15 amos, half amma gap on each side between the wagon and the side of the road. That's another amma, 16 amos. So we know that the roads in the Diglei Amidbar were 16 amos. That's where we get our measurements for a Rishus Harabim, that it has to be 16 amos wide. Valkein, and therefore continues the Mishnah Berurah, if the street or the road is less than 16 amos, ain't a Rishus Harabim ben HaTorah, it's not a Rishus Harabim daraisa, ala karmelis, it would be a karmelis. Rishus Harabim cannot be roofed over the Diglei Midbar lo haya mekurim, because again, the Machane Yisrael, the Diglei Midbar were not roofed over, and it's from there that we learn out the rules that govern what makes a Rishus Harabim. Okay? We're going to pause over here. We'll continue next time. We'll go weiter in Siv Zayin. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The discuss of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klai Yisrael, the Baruch Shem should send Yeshua, Serfuas, Panasa, Cheduchim, Tol, Zinid. We should be zeicher to see the Biaska El Tzedek, B'mehera v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.